Now, one of the misconceptions which Hinduism has suffered is that it is very otherworldly, it is superstitious, it is not practical about this world. But if you look at the archaeological evidence, people in ancient India were quite advanced in many technologies. You look at civil engineering, you look at architecture, metallurgy, you look at medicine, farming, water harvesting, ships, on and on, cotton, so many things. And you find that the evidence from early centuries, very early centuries, is very strong. Up to the British period where the British are remarking that Indians make superior steel. Ancient Indian steel called wood steel was exported to Greece, Roman Empire, to make swords and things like that, because it was far better than anything they could make. So I'm talking about practical things. This is not just some otherworldly, philosophical, mystical discovery, but these are very practical things that people were doing very well. The first metal to be distilled was zinc in India, in Rajasthan. It's archaeologically accepted by the world community. In fact, some European society of metallurgists or whatever put a big thing out there in that location that this is the first place where zinc was distilled. Now, the distillation of zinc is a breakthrough, because when you melt and when you heat a metal and it becomes liquid, then it becomes vapor, it evaporates, all the impurities are left behind, it evaporates, and then in another place you freeze it back, becomes solid again, you get the pure metal, 100%. All the impurities didn't evaporate, so they're left behind. So when you can make pure metals, then you can make alloys of arbitrary combinations. You see, so India had leading export technology in this sort of thing. And if you look at the archaeological sites and look at the evidence, there was a thriving economy of these. This would be like today's modern technology. It would be a big breakthrough in material science for that time. And this is also this type of prosperity of the external world. And I want to emphasize that Hindu society was not at the expense of neglecting the external world, which is a very, very big misunderstanding, we are told. That Hindus need to be saved by others because they don't know how to look after themselves, they're not progressive, they're frozen in time, they are, they don't have the idea of progress, of rationality. Well, how did they do all these things I'm talking about, you see? You also notice economic prosperity. The European historians of the history of economics, including now the latest encyclopedias on the history of world economics, will tell you that till the 1850s, India and China had about 2/3 of the world GDP. India had like 25%, China had 30%, something like that. And what's now called the West was less than 20%, including Europe, US, and so on. And this it took about 100 years, I think from 1750s to 1850, that is when the decline came, and there was an industrial revolution in England, a whole lot of transfer. India, from being an export country, became an importing country. England, from being an import-oriented country, became an export-oriented country. That 90-year, 100-year period is when things shifted. But until that, for thousands of years, India and China were very advanced in economy. And this is written and documented by lots of traders and lots of ancient historians. And the reason when I give talks in schools in this country, I often say, well, where does India fit in American history? And I'm surprised that hardly any history teacher, once I was made chair of the Asian Studies in the state of New York by the governor. And so he had his sister, that particular governor, his sister was a teacher, educator. So she brought all these leading educators to a discussion on this. And I said, I first want to ask you, when you're teaching, why do you want to teach India, and how would you teach India in the context of American history? Not one of them started by saying, you know, that's what Columbus was looking for. Not one of them thought of that. It was not positioned that way in their head. So then I had to tell them that the Queen of Spain was like a venture capitalist looking for a big intellectual property breakthrough, which would be worth a lot. And that was a sea route to India. And because the sea route would bypass the land hassles of the land route. And the reason the land route was a hassle is because the Ottoman Empire, which was Muslims, the Ottoman Empire, controlled Central Asia, Eastern Europe. So the land route, which was traditionally called the Silk Route, from China and India on one side and Europe on the other side, blocked by the Ottoman Empire. So either they would not let things through, or they would charge 20 times the price. They would decide as a strategic advantage they had access to the Indian and Chinese goods. Europeans did not. It was a huge problem because Europe needed these things. And there was no sea route at that time. There was no Suez Canal. There was no around Africa, none of that. So the Columbus journey was a venture capital journey to find a sea route to India. And that is how this whole thing started. So you see, if you look at, and then Vasco da Gama took the route around Africa. One of them wanted to take the route across the Pacific, across the Atlantic, and the other one around Africa. So going east and west respectively, hoping to find India, and didn't know that American continent is in the middle, and the rest we all know what happened. So you see, India has been a very important part of world history as a positive economy, as a source of knowledge, as a source of technology, as a source of all kinds of things. The Middle East had huge amount of Indian workers. Today they are workers of different level, but you know, you will see university professors, mathematicians, astronomers, medicine people, doctors, all kinds of people in the medieval era in the Middle Eastern countries coming from India, being acknowledged as such. And a lot of the Indian knowledge translated into Arabic and Persian became part of the Middle East knowledge system, and then centuries later would be translated into European languages like trigonometry, geometry, algebra, a lot of these things which Europeans feel they got from the Arabs, and therefore they misclassify it as Arab numerals and so on. Okay, what they don't know is that the Arabs themselves got it from India, which the Arabs acknowledged. Al-Jabr was an author whose book starts off by saying that this is being translated from Malayali. And that book by Al-Jabr, when it later gets translated into Latin and so on, that knowledge becomes known as algebra. So this India is a source of knowledge for the West, for the Middle East, and all over Asia. I mean, the people who never try to hide Indian contributions, you will find them in China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia today. It's very interesting. When my foundation used to do these world conferences, once we got a delegation, I think 15 years ago, we got a delegation from China on Vedanta philosophy, Hindu philosophy, you know, ancient mathematics, Vedic science, all these kind of things. There were like quite a lot of them. And I thought that maybe they must be dissidents, or they must be people that have run away from China, and maybe these things are not allowed. So I spent a lot of time getting to know them, and they told me it's just the opposite. The Chinese government is encouraging all this because they think it's part of their history, and they want to bring in all this knowledge from all the sources. And there's a large amount of study of Indology in China, which is very respectful of the Indian sources, not like some of the Indology in this country. So in Southeast Asia, you go to Southeast Asia, you'll find a huge respect for Hindu and Buddhist origins of so much knowledge. And you know, we think of Buddhists having taken Buddhism to all over Asia, East Asia, but when the monks were going, they were taking samples of food and agriculture, they were taking music, they were taking linguistics, they were taking mathematics, astronomy. It was a huge amount of knowledge export. So places like Nalanda, which is a Buddhist university, would be like today's, you know, Duke University, Harvard University, Princeton University. They were like Ivy Leagues. And if you look at the history of Nalanda, it's written by foreign students. There are volumes written by students in Mongolia, students in Cambodia who had gone, and students in China who had gone there and studied and brought back, great accounts of what the curriculum is and what is being taught. So from that you can reconstruct what was going on in Nalanda. It was attracting the cream of the brightest students from these countries. And the Queen of Cambodia was quite a regional power at one time. The Queen of Cambodia had endowed a whole college, built a college within Nalanda University for the sole purpose so her brightest students could be sent, live there, bring the knowledge back. So like today, people from around the world would go to some Ivy League in the US and bring the knowledge back to India. That used to be the way it was in India, where people from other countries used to come. So you have to understand that there is this inner journey, Adhyatma Vidya, mystical, trying to do some knowledge gathering inside, using these meditation techniques and other techniques, and you cannot say that this is otherworldly, mystical, world negating. These are unfortunate labels that have been given to Hinduism, and we've accepted them. Whenever I'm told that Hindus are mystical, they're otherworldly, they're world negating, I tell them that, look, chances are 1 in 10 doctors in your town may be an Indian. Now, he's not world negating. You don't want a world negating guy doing surgery on you. People who are in Google, people who are in NASA, they're not some world negating bunch of guys. So then the answer is, yeah, but they learned all this from the West. It wasn't like that. And this is so sad. Our people are colonized. So Narayan Murthy, when asked once why Indians so smart, and he said, oh, British, we're very grateful British came and taught us math and English. And so, we don't even know our own history. So it's so ridiculous, So the history of science is not well known, of Indian science. And this is why my foundation started a 20-volume project many years ago. We finished 9 volumes on the history of Indian science and technology. And we focused on hard evidence-based technologies like steel, zinc, copper production, metallurgy, cities, making construction material, water highways, these sort of things, shipping, and so on. And so to remove this, to combat this stigma that one of the things wrong with this Hindu tradition is that it leads to social deprivation, and you don't care about healing people, and you are worrying about, because they come up with some kind of a Hindu argument to show that it's a useless thing, that you are trapped in some cycle of karmic fatalism, and that's why you abuse your women, that's why there's poor people, we have to send some missionaries to rescue you. And so if people become Hindus, then they're going to be abusive. This sort of a very negative, almost like an anti-social portrayal has been frozen about us. Whereas if you look at all the facts of the science and technology contributions are not deniable, and they are not, you cannot argue against physical evidence. So we decided that the first 20 volumes will be only based on physical evidence, not text evidence. So a text may say somebody had a spacecraft, but we don't believe it because I haven't seen one. It says there was some weapon of mass destruction, so it must be a nuke, but I haven't seen a crater with radioactivity. So I don't believe that. I'm a hard scientist. I don't believe in all that unless I can see evidence today. But I can see a steel pillar. We can do research on it and find out that there's a layer of phosphorus which is exceedingly few microns, and that prevented it from rusting for a very long time. We can see evidences of all sorts of technological things which we can bring into a laboratory and we can evaluate them. So if we can construct the history of science and technology starting with only physically verifiable evidence, that meets the criteria of rigor. So based on that, we are constructing, it will take a very long time, an accurate picture of Hindu contributions. These people were Hindus. Another interesting thing that you find out is that this is not Brahmin related, nothing to do with the elite text kind of people. The example I gave you of zinc distillation, those would be people by today's standard considered low caste. They were the ones doing all this. A lot of, so you see which jati, or, how they moved up or down also had to do with the economy of a particular trade, which may go up at some point in time and go down at some point in time. And it's not like frozen in some kind of a historical canon or religious canon. That was not the case. So completely, one has to just start at scratch trying to understand our history. The history of Hinduism is a highly misrepresented history at this point in time.